So if you're dealing with chronic hives or urticaria, it can really be a debilitating situation, not just because of the discomfort that it can create, but it can restrict somebody's ability to work or even just socialize. Or some people feel like, I can't even leave the house right now. And the really tricky part about this situation, when you start to research what are the solutions, and you see, oh wow, there is no solution for this problem. And I think that it's viewed that way because there isn't a solution to the problem. And the reason that there is not one solution to this problem is because there's such a variety of underlying causes that can create the trouble. And that's really going to vary from person to person. So in this video, I want to help you understand the most common underlying causes and steps you can take to figure out which may be creating this trouble for you. Let's see if we can help you find some answers. Here we go.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So we know that I'm not a doctor and I'm not giving you medical advice here. I'm just a guy that digs through some of these studies on this topic and helps you understand what type of information these studies might be showing us. So when we're looking at this chronic hive situation, know that you really have to become like a health detective because the underlying causes are so varied from person to person. I've had clients where we improved this issue in a week and a half, and I've had clients where it took us 9 months to figure out what was going wrong, and it was really annoying. But you really have to dig into things to figure out what could be creating this trouble for you. And when I show you some of the more common underlying causes, it's going to make sense why it can be so hard to figure out what's causing this issue from person to person. But the first study I want to look at when we start to dig into this was a study on the prevalence of gastrointestinal symptoms and cobalamin deficiency in patients with chronic urticaria. And this study said that 70% of patients with chronic urticaria reported experiencing gastrointestinal symptoms. The most common symptom identified was gastroesophageal reflux, or GERD. And they also saw a lot of people with vitamin B12 or cobalamin deficiency. So when we look at this, somebody might look at that piece of information and say, wow, this hives issue really causes a lot of digestive symptoms. But I don't view it that way at all. I view it as looking at these digestive symptoms first, because 70% is a really big number when you look at a study. Usually a study will be like 50.5% of the people showed this, so that means that this must be the problem. Something 70% or high like that, that's a really slam dunk. So I look at this as when you're trying to figure out this hives issue, you really want to put everything you can in your favor. And hives is really hard to figure out, but digestive symptoms is pretty easy. So if a person can take steps to improve these digestive symptoms, are they going to help out their hive situation? We don't know, but you really want to put everything you can in your favor. And to understand why these digestive symptoms might matter at all, we need to understand that the skin is the biggest organ that we have, and it happens to be a detoxification organ. And when you look on things like, WebMD or something like that, you're going to see like, well, you can't detox the skin because the body can't use the skin to remove toxins. The body has other detoxification organs to do that stuff for you. Don't be so silly. But the reality is that those other detoxification organs are the main players, but sometimes they don't work so well. So the body has to look for backup systems. So this study here on decreased skin-mediated detoxification contributes to oxidative stress and insulin resistance. They tell us that the skin, which is the largest organ of the body, can degrade, inactivate, and eliminate numerous xenobiotics and endogenous toxic compounds through its xenobiotic drug metabolizing enzymes, ROS scavenging system, and sweat glands. So when we sweat, that has the ability to carry some toxins out. We know it carries electrolytes out. We hear about that all the time. Oh, you sweat, you lost all these electrolytes. Do we really think that's the only thing that can go out in the sweat? No, the skin has the ability to be a detoxification organ. It's not the primary detoxification organ, but it has the ability to be a backup system. The body has a lot of backup systems when initial systems are not working correctly. It's really this amazing machine. The problem is if the body has to use the skin for its detoxification pathways, well, a lot of those pores and sweat glands can be blocked and get clogged up or get irritated by these toxins leaving the system, and that can create a wide variety of symptoms like itching or rashes or hives. So to think about why this might have the ability to happen, we want to understand the body's main detox pathway. So most of us know that the liver is in charge of filtering out most of the junk in the body. It filters the toxins out. Yay, liver, way to go, good job. But the liver doesn't have like a trap door on the back where all the toxins just go out. So what the liver does is it puts a lot of those toxins into the bile that it produces. And bile is this soapy substance that the liver makes, and then it sends down here to the gallbladder, and the gallbladder stores and concentrates that bile. So the body uses this bile to help us emulsify dietary fats. It kind of helps us break down dietary fats. It helps us access fat-soluble vitamins like A, E, D, and K. That's pretty important. And this bile is also used to help neutralize acids that leave the stomach. So we eat food and we acidify that food with our stomach acid, and then when it leaves the stomach, that triggers this gallbladder to squirt the alkaline bile down that helps neutralize those acids, helps us emulsify our fats, and helps all that digestive process. The thing is that it's also going to carry the toxins that the liver filtered out of the body through this intestinal tract as it's helping to digest all of our food and help us digest that food correctly. It carries these toxins out, so then these toxins go out the back door when we poop like a champion. Now, a lot of the bile salts get recycled, a big percentage of those, so that we can have more bile and it keeps working. So a lot of the salts get recycled, but the bile substance itself is not all being recycled. It's coming out the back door because that's part of what makes our stool that darker color. When bile is not flowing correctly, we see a stool that's very light because the bile is not moving through there correctly. So not all of our bile gets recycled, it's the bile salts that get recycled. So we need to understand that this is the body's main detox pathway. Now the kidneys are involved in getting rid of some toxins, even the lungs are involved in getting rid of some toxins. And we also have that skin as a backup detoxification organ. But this is the main pathway to get rid of the junk in the body. The liver did all that work to get rid of it, and it's going to go out the back door, just like it's supposed to. Here's the problem. There's a wide variety of issues that can thicken up that bile so it won't flow correctly. Now it's not coming down to help us digest our food, so we're not really breaking that food apart like we should and getting all the nutrients out of that food. But the main thing is if the bile's not flowing, all those toxins that the liver filtered out are not going to go out the back door. They're not going to be removed. So now we have a problem of toxins accumulating in the system, and the body's like, well, what do I do now? Well, the kidneys are helping out a little bit, but they can't get rid of all this solid waste. They're supposed to take care of the liquid waste. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to push some of this out through the skin, and that's going to help me get rid of some of these toxins. And we sweat really all the time. We're always sweating, but it's in such a small amount that it basically just evaporates as soon as it hits the skin. But that sweating has the ability to carry some toxins out when those toxins are getting to a higher level, and the body needs a backup system. So another thing to think about is that when we can't really break down our food correctly, if we're not acidifying the food correctly, or we don't have this alkaline bile coming down to meet those acids and create this opposite pHs colliding of this alkaline bile and the acidic stuff from the stomach, those opposite pHs colliding creates like this sizzle that really helps us bust the food apart and get all those nutrients out of that food. So if either of these sides of digestion are not working correctly, the food is not really being broken down correctly. So what happens if you put some food in your trash can behind your house and you leave it there for a few days, and you go back and you open the lid and you stick your head in there? It's not super pleasant. It started to break down by process of rotting and fermenting, and it creates all these toxins and gook, and here comes some bugs and all this stuff that's just not that pleasant. Well, that happens in the body too. If it can't be acidified correctly, if the food can't be broken down correctly, it has to break down by rotting and fermenting, and that can create more toxins. And also the food that came in, since it's not broken down into nutrients that the body can utilize, now it becomes a burden that the body has to try to figure out how to get rid of. So this inability to digest our food is creating a lot of gook in the system, is really what's going on. It's creating more gook and junk than the system should really have in it. So when we start to look at studies of what may be going on here, we really want to look at this study here on chronic urticaria, and they're basically looking at some different things that may be associated with the condition. And when they looked at the incidence of people either having their gallbladder removed or having some type of gallbladder dysfunction, they saw that there was 62% of the women over 40 had either had their gallbladder removed or had some type of gallbladder dysfunction. And a lot of them even had experienced the hives before their gallbladder had been removed. So I don't want you to view it like, oh man, having my gallbladder removed gave me hives. Now, when the gallbladder is removed, there no longer is that bolus of bile that can come down and help neutralize the acids, help us really emulsify our dietary fats. So that is missing. So that ability to really break down the food appears to have the ability to be diminished or decreased. But the liver still makes bile and sends it through this biliary pathway right down here into the small intestine. It just may sort of be trickling down there all the time, just a little bit at a time. And so maybe for some people it's flowing well enough that it has the ability to help them emulsify some fats and digest their foods a little bit better. At least the toxins that the liver are filtering out are still making it into this intestinal pathway so that they can go out the back door. But the problem is, a lot of times people have to have their gallbladder removed because bile was not flowing correctly. And remember, this gallbladder's job is to concentrate the bile. So when it's not flowing, it continues to concentrate in the gallbladder until it concentrates into sludge or even into stones. So in a lot of cases, they're like, oh man, I'm having a gallbladder attack, we're going to cut that out, we'll get rid of the gallbladder. But they don't always take steps to clear out that pathway if it had been backed up and blocked as well. So someone can have their gallbladder removed and not have that pathway flowing correctly, and now the body is not detoxing the way that it really wants to detox. So I think that could be why you would see that a lot of these people could have these hives even before their gallbladder was removed, just with some type of gallbladder dysfunction, because the bile is not flowing the way that it's supposed to flow. If someone had their gallbladder removed, it's always removed because bile was not flowing, whether it was gallstones that caused that attack or just sludge that was backing up the movement. It's always removed because of some problem like that where things were not flowing, and then maybe an infection kind of kicked in and made it gangrene, as are the most severe cases. But something went wrong that had to have it be removed. So the symptoms of that thing going wrong can show up even before the removal. So just don't view it like removing a gallbladder is going to cause hives. I do believe it has the ability to magnify some of the issues that we're talking about with reducing the ability to really break the food down correctly. But it's just the malfunction of that bile flow and the gallbladder that has the ability to create a lot of this trouble. And what's great is a person can be dealing with hives and they're like, okay, am I dealing with symptoms that might indicate that my bile is not flowing correctly? Is my stool lighter than the color of corrugated cardboard? Do I sometimes have loose stools, or do I have constipation issues? Do I get nauseous when I eat higher fat meals? Do I have other skin or acne type issues that could indicate that the body is not detoxing correctly? There's a lot of symptoms that can indicate that bile is not flowing correctly. And if you're showing a lot of those symptoms, then wow, all of a sudden some things might be making sense. And a person could take steps to improve that bile flow, and when they do that, do the hives improve? I don't know. That's really going to be up to you to figure out if that might be the underlying cause for you. And we'll put the link in the description below this video for our video on 10 signs of poor bile flow. So you can check that out and see if some of those things might be showing up for you. And I'm also going to link these studies that I'm showing you in that description below the video as well. And this one here, the overlap syndrome of urticaria and gastroesophageal reflux disease, this study showed that in urticaria patients, the prevalence of GERD, which is acid reflux, was 4-fold higher than patients without hives. Well, that's really got to say something to us. So when we're looking at this acid reflux issue, we know now that this acid reflux is most commonly caused by a lack of stomach acid. It's not caused by too much stomach acid like advertisers want us to think. There's this valve at the bottom of the esophagus called the lower esophageal sphincter that opens up so food can come back in, and then when food is being acidified, that valve closes so that it doesn't come back up and burn us. The trick is that valve is triggered by stomach acid. So if a person's only making a small amount of acid, but it's not enough to trigger that valve to close, then the small amount of acid they're having is going to come back up and burn them and create these reflux symptoms. So what that's telling us is that these people with this GERD issue are not acidifying their food well enough to truly break it down the way that it should. We saw in that one study that it was very common with these individuals with the hives to see low B12 deficiency issues. Well, we know that B12 comes from properly breaking down protein. It doesn't come from consuming protein, it comes from properly breaking it down. And in order to break down our protein, you gotta have enough stomach acid. Can't break down protein if you don't have enough stomach acid. So that's a really big sign of what may be going on. So when we're seeing all these correlations show up in different ways, we can see that both of these digestive functions are really important to help the body function correctly. Not only just to get the nutrients out of the food that we're eating, we know all the problems that can come from nutrient deficiencies, but when the food is not being broken down, it becomes a problem that the body deals with. Now this detox pathway is not working correctly, and that becomes even more problems, more burdens that the body has to try and figure out how to get rid of. So we really want both of these things working correctly. And the thing is, when they're not, it's really not hard to correct that. We see it daily. We hear from people that tell us that, man, I fixed my reflux when I acidified my stomach more. And now I'm not getting bloated anymore because I'm actually digesting my food. So this is not a difficult step to take. If you don't know how to do these things, we have a lot of videos that talk about this stuff. But my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, chapters 3 and 4, kind of walk you through figuring out which aspects of digestion are not working correctly and steps you can take to improve those. And the book is available on Amazon, but in the description below the video, I'll give you a link just to get the whole thing totally for free. And you can just jump to chapters 3 and 4 to understand which of those steps may be most appropriate for you. So we see the prevalence of the gallbladder problems that have the ability to be associated with these hives. We see the occurrence of GERD and acid reflux. So we're just really looking at digestive malfunctions that have the ability to magnify this problem. Now, where this really gets tricky is that there's other things that can show up with these people that are dealing with these chronic hive issues. Like mold hypersensitivity is very common, and I'll put some links in the description so you can dig into that a little bit more if you need to. But the situation that this becomes so confusing is that two people can be in the same house and one person won't be affected by mold at all, and the other person is completely having their life ruined just because of their hypersensitivity to that mold. So a lot of people have a mold problem in the house and have no idea. They might even walk right past the mold and say, oh, that really needs to be cleaned, but they don't know that it's deteriorating their health in a significant way. They could also have mold issues that they don't even know, that are not visible, that are just going on from some type of water damage that could have been there before they even moved in. So there's a lot of ways that mold problems can create a big issue here. And this next one, this salicylate sensitivity, can be a really tricky one that you're probably not going to hear about a whole lot. And my boy had some hives issues that kept showing up when he was a toddler, and it took us a lot of effort to figure out what was going on. We had a mold issue in the house before that, so I kind of felt like that might be the problem. We found out that he seemed to be having a sensitivity to salicylic acid, and salicylic acid belongs to a category of drugs called salicylates. And these salicylic acids can also be in a lot of foods like beans and lentils and strawberries and cauliflower. They can be higher in some of those foods, but also this compound is in a lot of products like cosmetics and air fresheners and bubble baths and pretty much anything with a fragrance. Those things can be really high, like dryer sheets sometimes. So we can find this level of compound higher in a lot of products and in some foods as well. So what was going on with us is that he was getting some hives, and we realized that we just put this air freshener in his room and we would change to some other dryer sheet, and it just seemed to be too much coming in at once that overloaded his system. And when we removed those things, and I also took steps to make sure that his bile was moving correctly, then all of a sudden the hives went away and they never showed up again. So some people, I hear from stories of people having to avoid foods and products like this for a long time, and other people seem to help the body function at a higher level and get to the point where dealing with some of these things is not going to overburden the body. The body can handle detoxifying them just like anybody else might. So that can be the biggest thing to remember when you're becoming this health detective trying to figure out what's creating this problem for you. It's that the triggers and the causes might be different. So you might find something, oh man, I had a peanut butter sandwich and I had hives. Peanut butter sandwiches give me hives. So that may be what triggered it, but that doesn't mean it's the actual underlying cause. If a person doesn't have their bile flowing and the body can't detoxify correctly, well, if it could, maybe that peanut butter sandwich wouldn't trigger the hive situation. Maybe it would just bring in something that the body wanted to get rid of and viewed as an invader or viewed as some type of toxin that it couldn't deal with, but it could get rid of that if everything was working correctly. So sometimes if someone has a mold problem in the house and they eat strawberries and they get hives, well, they're going to think, well, strawberries give me hives. But the reality was they had a mold problem that was really creating this huge burden in the body to where now the strawberries was just the straw that broke the camel's back. So sometimes the triggers, it's great to remove those triggers. You absolutely want to remove anything that's going to trigger the situation. But sometimes there's an underlying cause that's elevating the whole system's problem so that that little thing is enough to just make everything explode and look like it caused the problem all on its own. So if you have digestive symptoms at all, that becomes a priority. Correct those. Let's knock that out of the way first and then see what else uncovers to figure out what may be creating this problem for you. And since the poor bile flow and the gallbladder problems and the detox pathway not working correctly are so common with this issue, and if you already know that you have signs of bile not flowing correctly, you can jump over right now and check out our video on 5 steps to improve bile flow that'll give you more insights into how to get that going. I can't wait to hear about your results.